You wrote code, you ran the code, and it broke. That's reality number one. The reality number two is you copied the code that AI generated for you, you pasted the code in your project, you ran it, and things are not working. That's reality number two. Irrespective of which reality you live in, let me tell you that coding is one of the tiniest part of entire programming cycle. There is another bigger part associated with it is called debugging, and you got to master debugging if you want to build something that you will be proud of and you yourself have a longer belief that things will work in your customer or the user base as well. Hey, this is Tapas. Welcome back to 40 days of JavaScript, and today we are going to celebrate the day 35. What is the celebration about? Because we are going to fix the broken problem. In this video, we are going to take examples, maybe 5 or 6 examples that are broken. We are going to run them, and then we are going to find out what is the problem in that through debugging. Then you'll be fixing it and you'll understand what exactly was missing when the code was broken. I hope you enjoy this one, and if you do so, don't forget to subscribe to the tapaScript because that motivates a lot to keep going. Thanks to all the subscribers, all my members who have supported me throughout. Without you guys, I would not have come this far. So keep continuing your support so that this channel grows and I get more and more motivation to bring things like 40 days of JavaScript in future as well. Before we get started, super exciting news that with this video, the day 35, session 35, we are getting done with the module number 5. And then with the next video, we are getting into the module number 6, our last module, probably the most anticipated module as well, right, of this 40 days of JavaScript. And again, everything that we'll be doing in the last module, the base of it lies in all the previous modules. So if you're jumping into the last module directly, do it at your own risk. But my suggestion would be always to go through all the sessions that we have done because that's how you build your fundamentals. In the next module, we are going to learn about performance optimization, what are the best practices, how JavaScript works behind the scene, how garbage collection works, what are the different web APIs, handy web APIs you can use. You might be already using some of them. How to prepare for your JavaScript interviews and a final project, end-to-end project at the end, the mammoth big project. But before that, today's session, very important session to make your hands dirty with debugging and learn something solid about problem fixing. Let's get started with day 35. Our first problem is about calculate discount problem. Say we have a function that calculates a discounted price based on the user's total purchase. Okay. So there is a total that gets passed to this calculate discount function. The expectation over here is based on the total amount, there is a discount that is decided whether 10% or 15% and 20%. And then the discount is applied on the total. And then we are returning the discounted price from this particular function. And you are seeing that with if and else, this has been achieved. If total is greater than equals to 100, we are doing a 10% discount. Total is greater than equals to 300, we are doing a 15% discount. Total is more than 500, we are doing a 20% discount. And then we are deducting the discount and returning the value. Now, if I add few test cases, for example, for this test case where my total purchase is of say 50 USD or 50 INR, whatever it is. Now, what it is going to be? Is the customer going to get a discount? Most unlikely because our discount starts from 100 and above, right? So in this case, the expected price that the customer has to pay is 50 because no discount applied. Now, if I do another test case of 150, what will be the expected? Expected will be 135 because it is 150, the total minus the 10% discount applied, right? Because it is greater than equals to 100. So 150 minus 15, it will be 135. Similarly, if I add two more test cases for total 350, the expected is 297.5, and for total 600, the expected value is 480 that this particular function should return. Now, let's see what exactly happening, what this console.logs are printing in the console. The first one is 50, correct. The second one is 135. But the third one, we were expecting 297.5, but we are getting 315. So something wrong. It is not matching. Fourth one, we were expecting 480, but we are getting 540. So this is also wrong. So last two output is wrong, whereas the first two seems to be correct. So that means there is some problem with our logic. If I come back to the logic again, can you identify what is the problem? Got the problem? Great. If you haven't yet, then let me give you some hint and then we'll try debugging it. The hint is here. Think about how if, else, if work together, right? How each of this block, if and else, get evaluated. We have learned that in the previous sessions, right? If first condition that returns true will be executed, and then rest of the things will be completely ignored. Now look into the order that these conditions are specified. What happens if the total value is 500? Which particular condition is going to execute versus what should be executed? Is it checking the most specific or the highest discount first? What exactly happening with it? I think that's where the problem. This is what the hint is. Now let's go back to the browser again. Let's go to the sources tab. With Control P, we'll bring this calculate discount.js file, and we had a session where I have taught you how to put the debug point, go step by step to figure out what exactly happening. So we are going to do exactly the same thing. Now to run this, I am going to comment out all the past scenarios and going to take one of the failed scenarios where the expectation was 480 but it was giving something wrong. So let's go back to the browser again, refresh it, and you have the exact code over here, right? Now let me put a debug point over here and then a debug point over here and then refresh it. The debug point has hit. So my starting point is line number 20. From here, I can do F8 and go inside this calculate discount function. So the calculate discount is passing 600. Expectation is 480, but we were getting something else. Now this 600 comes over here and we are expecting, like if it is 600 total means, if it is 500 or more, we are supposed to give what? 20% discount, right? That is what the shop told. But what exactly happening with the code? Let's go step by step. So to go step by step, you will press F10. So I'm going to do F10. I'm coming to the next line. In this line, the total value is still 600. 600 is greater than equals to 100. What do you think about that condition? You can always select them, mouse over, the condition is true. So if true means it is going to go inside this if block. So I do F10 again, it goes inside the if block. Now what is happening? You wanted to give a discount of 20%, but the discount is getting applied is now 10%. Even though you have a condition says total greater than equals to 500 somewhere below, and this condition also matches. This also gives true, but your code is written in such a way you are never ever getting an opportunity to go over here and then go inside this discount, 20% discount. Correct? Here itself, the discount is setting to 10%. And as the code is written with if, else, if, else, if, and we have given a hint, right? When if true and one of the block gets evaluated, the rest of the block will be ignored. That's why if I do F10, it is ignoring all of them, making the discount as 0.1, that is 10%. And then all the calculation on top of this 600 total is happening now based on the 10% discount. So now the total minus total into discount in this case will be 540. We were expecting 480. We identified the problem. The problem here is we are not getting a chance to execute this block or this number 600. Now the thing is how to fix this broken problem. So talking about the fix, we have to fix this code in such a way that my code execution reaches discount 20% for a value, a total value more than or equals to 500. The tips that I want to share over here is when using if, else, always write conditions from the most specific or the highest values to the list. Here we have done from the lowest value to the highest. We just need to reverse it. How? We are going to bring first this block at the top. So I'm cutting it from here and going to bring it over here. So now if the total is greater than equals to 500, you give a 20% discount. Else if total is greater than equals to 300, you give a discount of 15%. And last, I'm adding this other logic, like if total is greater than equals to 100, then only you give 10% discount. Now what will happen? If your total is passes 600, this will be caught over here itself. If the total is pass around 250, this won't be evaluated, this won't be evaluated, it will come over here. If the total is pass around 300 or 310, this won't be evaluated, this will be evaluated because it is greater than equals to 300. And as this is done, though this also satisfied, but it is not going to go inside it because there is an if and else, right? So with this, let us run this test case once again. Now we see it is 480. The proper value has come over here. So it is working as expected. Now if I go to source and I have a debug point, just refresh it. Now for the value 600, F10, 600 is greater than equals to 500. Of course, it is true. And all these conditions are also true for this total value. But this will go over here first get the proper discount, which is like 20%, and then come out. It is not going to go to any of this. So that is a learning, that when you are doing if else kind of thing, and you have a logic to check against certain value, always start with the higher value and then go to the list. So that is a problem that we have solved in this broken code. I hope you learned something new, not only like what to fix, but how to identify the problem using your Chrome Dev tools, and then about fixing it and trying out how it is going to work in the correct fashion. Let's go to the problem number 2. Our next problem is closure confusion problem. Closure is always a confusion, right? I hope it is not after the closure session. So let's see. Let's look into the code first. Here we have a function called create buttons. What it does, it just create 3 buttons. So it starts with 1, end at 3, 1, 2, 3, and every time it creates a button means it push a function inside the buttons array. So it means for I equals to 1, it push a function inside the buttons array. For I equals to 2, it will push another function inside the buttons array. For I equals to 3, it will push another function inside the buttons array. Ultimately, it returns a buttons array. So that if I call this function, I can get an array of buttons. From there, I can take out button 1, button 2, button 3. Each of them are holding nothing but a function, and I can execute them like this. So create buttons, if I call, it is going to return an array. We all have learned about array destructuring. Using destructuring, we are creating button 1, button 2, button 3, basically the variables, and assigning the return value of it. Return value, what it will be? It will be for button 1 a function, button 2 a function, button 3 a function. Then we are calling button 1 with the parenthesis, means we are invoking the function. Same for button 2, same for button 3. So what is going to be the output in this case? That is what it is. What do you think? Let's look into the function. What is the function doing? Once this function gets executed, it executes a console.log. What is this console.log printing? It is printing button and then the value of I clicked. So it means for the first button, when it is getting executed, my expectation is button 1 clicked. Then the next iteration, when I is 2, my expectation is for button 2 is button 2 clicked, and for the third button 3 clicked when this button 3 gets executed. So here I'm expecting button 1 clicked, here I'm expecting button 2 clicked, here I'm expecting button 3 clicked. That is my expectation. Now let's see the output. The output of the closure confusion problem is, for button 1 also it says button 4 clicked, for button 2 also says button 4 clicked, button 3 also says button 4 clicked. Is it right? No, this is not right, because this is what we were not expecting. For button 1, we were expecting button 1 clicked, here button 2 clicked, and here button 3 clicked. Why it happened? Can you go to the source tab, search the click button with Control P, and then put a debug point over here. A debug point may be inside this, a debug point probably here, and then for button 1 a debug point, button 2 a debug point, button 3 a debug point. So we are getting like, we are putting all this debug point because at this point we may not be sure where the problem is. Some of you would have already guessed the solution, but for many of you who are beginner to it, let me tell you, like, when you are wearing the debugging hat and you want to put the debug point to start debugging your things, you can do the same thing on VS Code also. I have actually taught you in the debugging session before, like how to configure and how to go about it. But I prefer always DevTools, because same place where I can see console, sources, element inspection, everything together. Now, when you are targeting debugging with open mind, you may not know eventually where to put your debug point. So while you're guessing, like, hey, where to put the debug point, will it be the right place or not? Put the debug point in as many places possible. And then once you run it first time, okay, these are not relevant. Remove the debug point. Run it second time. Okay, few more places are not relevant. Okay, remove the debug point. Ultimately, we'll figure out and find out to a situation where you might have only 1 or 2 debug points, and okay, so issues will be between probably this 1 or 2 or 2 or 3 debug points. So you are narrowing down your focus, like where the problem could be. This is just like how detectives are, right? When they don't have any clue about like who is the culprit, they take everybody, they suspect everyone, and then they narrow down to the actual suspect and then identify the criminal. Same thing with debugging as well. So that's the reason, just to mimic that, I have put the debug point in every corner in this code, and I'm going to just refresh it, and it's going to hit the debug point. So first, this debug point was hit because of this line number 15, where we have call this create buttons. Now, first time this create button is getting called, let's see what is happening. Let's do F10. Okay, I equals to 1, I less than equals to 3, so it will go inside, and now it has pushed this particular function. If I come to buttons now, I see that in the 0th element, I already have this function, right? And there is something called scope. If I expand, I have closure and it says I is 1. Now let's go to F10. Again, the second element went inside. Again, third element went inside. And now what is the value of I? I's value is 3. So I will increase now. Now what is the value of I? I is 4. 4 is not less than equals to 3. So I won't go inside. Definitely that's how the for loop works. And then if I do F10, I'll come over here. So here if I see buttons having the length of 3, and then in each of the index there is a function, and I can actually expand, and if I want to debug inside looking into a scope, I am able to see this. See, here I find I is 4. For the first one, if I go and expand the scope where I saw I is 1, now I am finding I is 4. Here also inside the closure, I am finding I is 4. Here also, if I expand the last one, inside the scope, I am finding the value of I is 4. As the value of I has already become 4 because of some reason, and if I continue my debugging to come to the execution of button 1, which is nothing but this particular function, and if I again go inside this scope, I am finding the i's value is 4. So it means if the i's value is 4, of course the function that I'm executing over here, it will say button 4 clicked, isn't it? So for button 1, the closure holds the value of I, which is 4. I was expecting 1. So that is the reason button 1 is actually giving me the output, the log output, that button 4 clicked. I'm sure that will be the case for button 2 also. If I go there, again I value will be 4. That will be the case for button 3 also. The I value will be 4. And that is the whole reason once I come to the console, is 3 times it prints button 4 is clicked. It is not giving button 1, button 2, button 3. Can you think of what is the problem? Here is the code in front of you. So again, let's start with some hints. This is the case of a closure, a classic case of a closure, which is this inside a loop. I hope you know closure. I'm not getting into the details of it because that's what we have done in an in-depth session about closure with a lot of examples. So this is a closure inside a loop. Now, next thing that you should notice, that in the loop for the counter like I am using var. So now it should come in your mind, what does var do in a loop? Does the function remember the value at the time it was created? What if you replace var with something called a let? So the solution is var is always the function scope, right? All the closures reference the same I, which ends up as a 4 after the loop ends, because var is always function scope, we have learned. We need something where this I value will be resetted in each of this loop iteration. That means we need something which is block scope, which is not going to leave beyond this block, and that's why we want to change this var with let, because if we create a variable with let, we can reassign value to this variable. That is one advantage. Second advantage is the variable I will now be block scope. Beyond this block or the iteration, the value of the I will not be existing. It will be reset to a new value because we are in the loop. First time the value of the I will be 1. Next time when the iteration comes, the I value will be destroyed and a new value will be assigned that time. That will be 2. And then it will be 3. So now let gives each iteration its own block scope. Each closure captures a different value of I, a different I altogether. But before, what was happening in our previous code, as var is function scope, all the closures were referencing to the same I which was in the function scope, and at the end of the iteration the value of that I was 4, and that's what it was referencing. Now with let, each iterations will have its own block scope, and so why each of this closure will capture the different I and different I value. So if I run the same program again, first the console, button 1 clicked, button 2 clicked, button 3 clicked, everything is right what we wanted. Let's go to the source tab once and just refresh because we already have the debug point. Let's do again F10, same I is 1. So this will push it. Now buttons will have one function. If I expand, of course, there is a scope and I is 1. Okay. Now I will let it go second time. I will let it go third time. And now if I see buttons, if you remember previously when I was in the 0th element, the function, I expanded the scope, the value of I was already becoming 4 because that time I was function scope and all the closure were referring to the same I scope value. That was number 4 at the end of the iteration. But now as it is block scope, each closure captures the different I for that particular block. So first one, the I is 1, it's captured there. And the second one, the I will be 2. Yeah, you see this? I is 2. For the third one, you will find I is 3. So as it is this way, now if I go for the execution of each of the button, so for button 1, when it comes, is its I is 1, so button 1 gets clicked. For button 2, its I is 2, so button 2 gets clicked. For button 3, its I is 3, so button 3 gets clicked. So that's the crux of the story, guys. Like whenever you are dealing with a closure inside a loop, make sure that the variable that you are using inside the closure or capturing the value, it has is block scope. If you don't do that, if you are relying on the function scope, you might end up getting a wrong value like what we have seen in this example. So 2 examples over, we have fixed 2 problems. Let's move to the third. The problem number 3 is about an unhappy button. Why this button is unhappy? Because every time you click on this poor button, it locks something on the console, but it says user clicked any n times, not a number times, not a number times, not a number times. That's the reason it is unhappy, because it wanted to say if you click first time, that user clicked 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, like that. So let's look into the code first. Let's see what's wrong. Let's try to understand what's wrong. This is the code of the unhappy.js file, and then we have our index.html file. In the index.html file, we have this button, the unhappy button, with the text click me and an ID called click button. In the unhappy.js, which is already included in this HTML file, if I go over there, what we are doing, we have an user object. It has few properties like name, clicks, and handle click. The name is having a value called tapas, clicks is having a value number 0, and handle click is having a method, is a function. Inside this function, what we are doing document.getElement by ID of this click button, which is nothing but this particular button. Very simple. And then adding a event listener, which is of click type. Means if you click, I want to handle this function. Where am I going to handle it? I'm going to handle it inside this. Now over here, what we are doing this dot clicks, means this one increasing by 1, and then console.log user this dot name, which is this tapas, clicked this dot clicks time. That's all we are doing so far. But what is happening when we are doing user.handleClick? Of course, this click handler is getting registered, everything is fine. But when I'm clicking on that button, I am getting that particular user, this dot name also not showing, clicked and showing any n times. Let's see the output over here. The user is not showing the username, clicked any n time. So neither the count value nor the name value is coming over here. That's the problem. So again, guys, can you identify the problem? So what are the hints that I can give you? The first and foremost hint is, can you identify whether I have used any arrow function over here or not? Especially for the value of a property inside an object. So this is an object, a user object. This is the key value pair. So I have a property called handle click whose value is a method, but instead of using the normal function, I have used an arrow function. Now, second thing, from our various sessions we have learned, arrow function don't bind their own this. Regular function bind their own this. And how regular function bind their own this, it depends on the implicit binding or the explicit binding that we have learned already. But in case of an arrow function, it is never bind their own this. So where is the this coming from arrow function? That's the next question that you will be asking yourself while debugging this. Is this dot clicks really mean user dot click, or it means anything else? Let's debug this out. Going to the source, Control P, unhappy.js, and I'm going to put a debug point over here, this dot clicks, because this is where I know the problem could be. Now let's do refresh and let's click on this click me button. The moment I click on this click me button, I get this debug point. Now here I'm inside this arrow function, isn't it? Clicks is saying undefined. Now I'm very curious. Inside an object, if I have a function, a method, which is a value of a property, and then later point of time, if I am invoking that particular method on the object, then this always refer to the object itself. This is what we call as implicit binding. But in this case, if I mouse over on this guy is never referring to the user object. It is referring to the window object, because here I have used an arrow function, and by definition arrow function never bind to their own this. That means arrow function is never ever bind this keyword to this particular object. Rather, it will go out to the parent, which is the window object. We have learned this in the session where we went very deep using this keyword. So in this case, the arrow function will force it that this refers to the window object, not the user object. Now, how can you fix it? The way that you can fix it by using a regular function than the arrow function, right? So let's do that. Now, coming back to the code, instead of an arrow function, let me just write a regular function like this. And then let's go back to the output. I've refreshed. I see it reflected the changes. I go to console and I will do click me. User tapas clicked one time. User tapas clicked two times. User tapas clicked three times. It will keep happening. This is working as expected. If I go to source again, now put the debug point back in the line number 6. And now if I click, now I'll mouse over on this. You seeing what happened? Now this is referring to the user object. This is the object and this object is the user object, where click value is 8 because 7 times I already clicked before. Now I clicked once more, 8. Handle click is a function, name is tapas. This is nothing but this particular user object, correct? So the moral of the story is, if you are having a method inside an object and having a this enclosed inside that function, if the function is a regular function, then the this will refer to the object itself. But if it is an arrow function doesn't got its own this, we know that it will point to the outer window object. That's the reason it was not finding name and clicks in the outer window object, and we were trying to do this dot clicks plus plus means undefined plus plus, undefined equals to undefined plus 1, which will result into a not a number. That's why it was giving not a number clicks. I hope you are quite clear about this one. So be mindful when you are dealing with objects, is methods and the arrow function. Let's move to the problem number 4. The next problem that we'll talk about is called process payment problem. That means we are trying to do some payment and our processing is failed or some kind of situation with it. Let's see what is the problem. We have a function called process payment, which takes a payment data. Inside the payment data is first check whether there is an amount mentioned or not. If the amount is not found, then it's throw an error called invalid amount. Then it checks for the payment method, whether you're paying through UPI, cash, card, whatever it is. If a payment method is also not found, then it throws another error, says payment method is missing. And then the payment happened. After that, it does a console.log payment process successfully. If there is an error happen, like you missed an amount or missed a method, it will come to this console.error and it will print the error. Okay. And either of the case, whether there is an error or there is no error, the finally will be always executed. We know that it will say payment attempt logged. Correct. So very simple. So if we now execute process payment with a valid amount and method, this simulate payment will be called. Then it will log payment process successfully. Then it will do payment attempt log. Now let us look into what is there inside the simulate payment function. The simulate payment function is another very straightforward function which takes this payment data again, and after taking that payment data, it just randomly fails because of some reason, maybe a network error. In 50% cases, maybe we are running on a very weak network. In a 50% cases, it's probably going to give me a payment gateway timeout. In other cases, goes through, the payment is successful, right? Then we are running this one with a process payment with valid amount and valid method. So what is going to happen in this case? If the amount is valid, method is valid, these two are not going to throw any error. It will go inside the simulate payment. There are more than 50% chance that there might be payment gateway timeout, but there are chances that it doesn't throw any error. Then it will just say payments passed successfully. And then it will say payment attempt logged. If there is an error thrown from here, it will say payment gateway timeout, and then it will say payment attempt logged. So I see payment processed successfully, payment attempt log, no issues at all. If I again run, I get a payment gateway timeout because there are always 50% or more than 50% chances that this payment gateway timeout will come, but I have not got any error because of the amount and method, because I'm passing the right amount and right method. So everything is correct. If I again and again run, sometime that error will come, sometime that error may not come. So this is working great. Now if I run another test case, if I comment out this test case and run this last test case where I am passing only the method, I am not passing the amount. Of course, payment amount is through an error. It will say invalid amount, and I am going to get an invalid amount error logged over here. Correct? Simulate method is never going to get called. Payment process is never going to get called because I am throwing an error from here itself. So it will directly come to the error and supposed to give me invalid amount as an error, and then finally will be always called payment attempt log. So invalid amount and payment attempt logged is what I'm expecting. Now if I go to my console, wow, I didn't get that at all. I'm getting something called error undefined. Invalid amount has not come at all. I'm getting undefined. This is the problem. Can you identify where is the problem? Well, so there are actually two problems here. The hint is you should always look into how you are throwing the error and your assumption that the error object will always have a message and the message is always populated. Don't assume things always. Here, what is happening? It is throwing an invalid amount from here, and here it is creating a new error object, passing the message explicitly and then throwing the error. Do you see the difference over here? Sometimes you won't see this difference at all. You won't actually value this difference at all. In the first case, the error actually doesn't have any message because this is itself is the error. If I don't do this message, if I take out this message over here and then if I run this, you see now I get invalid amount, because in this case this itself is the message. There is no error dot message. But in this case I have something called an error object. Inside that there is an explicit message. So if I turn on this scenario where I won't pass a method but an amount, something like this, now you see the behavior will change because now it will throw an error object with a message. I'm getting this error object. I'm not extracting out the error dot message. I'm actually logging the entire error itself. So in console, I'm getting the entire error itself where I was just expecting this payment method missing, just this particular error message. Now I have to handle both the cases. How can we handle both the cases? There are two ways that you can handle both the cases. One case would be make sure that whenever you are throwing an error, you're always throwing in this way. So it will have a throw new error, passing the message, and then everything will work. All the scenarios will work. Now if you do error dot message, your both the scenarios are covered, right? So if I go to output now, I'm only seeing the message. But along with this, the good practice is to, instead of just doing error.message directly, we can do whether this error is instance of an error object. In that case, you do error.message. Otherwise, you just print the error itself. Now, by chance, someone is not doing this throw new error. It is just doing a throw of invalid amount. This case also been handled over here because in this case it is not an instance of error. Of course you didn't do throw new error, so it will fall back to the error directly which you are passing over here. In the latter case, yes, it is an instance of an error, so it will take out the error dot message. Now if we run both the scenarios, let's first run only with amount is there but the payment method is not there. Yeah, it worked. Payment method missing, only showing the message. Now let's go to the another test case where you don't have the amount but only the method. So this is the case where you don't have the error object. This also will be handled to show only the error message which is invalid amount. Okay, so this is how you can handle things. This was another problematic scenario that I have created to demonstrate that when you are doing error handling, sometime this kind of problem might happen. What is the right way to catch it? Hope it was useful. Let's go to problem number 5. By the way, how are you liking it so far? Do you think videos like this will be useful? Even more videos like this will be useful to you? Let me know in the comment. I might create few more such videos if you guys think it will be useful, bringing some of this problem, how to tackle the solutions, getting much more deeper into it. Okay, I am definitely going to do this if you say so. Also, I've given you a few assignments. I'm going to show 5 problems in this video I've given you 4 more assignments to do. Make sure that you do those assignments as well. Try to find out what is the problem by yourself by doing debugging the way that I'm showing in this video. So now the fifth problem, the problem of tracking order problem. What is the problem? Problem is this page is going to track an order ID. Based on that order ID, it's going to fetch more details and going to show to you. But unfortunately, what is happening? It is showing an error that there is no order ID. Let's look into the code. Let's understand the code. A little bit lengthy one using async await and the promises. We have learned all these things, so I'm sure like you will rock it. So there is an async function called getOrder, which takes an order ID as an input or the parameter, and it checks if the order ID is say 1 to 3. It resolves a promise after 1 second, and it returns what is the data, order data. Basically for order 1 to 3, it's a book and the status is processing. This order is going on. If the order ID is not 1 to 3, the order is not found, it's reject this particular promise. Now we have another function, again an async function called get tracking info, which takes an order, take out the order ID from this. If the order ID is not found, it says no order ID, reject it. If the order ID is found, it just says, hey, this is the order ID. This is the location of the warehouse and your ETA for this particular order is 2 days. And again, I'm simulating an async call, so 1 second of delay. Finally, the track order. If I pass an order ID like 1 to 3, I have hard coded it so that I can simulate this order. 1 to 3 order get passed. I get the order first, then I pass the order to this tracking info. This is this one, and then it gives me the tracking info. From tracking info, if it resolved correctly, I should get an order ID, location, and ETA. So I print the order ID, location, and ETA. That's it. If there is an error, I handle this error using the catch error. But this code is not returning me correct thing. It is saying error no order ID. I am not expecting this because I have hard coded almost everything possible because the order ID is 1 to 3 and everything that I have done for this 1 to 3 itself, so order ID should be found. Can you figure out what is the problem in this code? Alright, irrespective you have figured out or not, let us do a debugging of this for everyone's sake. So Control P, let's do track order. Let's give a debug point in the get order in its resolve and its reject. Again with tracking info in its resolve and reject. And then over here where we are doing a track order and for the line number 39, which will be called first. Then I refresh this. Yes, track order gets called with the order ID 1 to 3. Now, if I do F10 to move to the next possible section, F10 means going inside the function. So in the function, the order ID is 1 to 3. Now I am calling the get order, this particular function. This get order function is defined over here. So if I do F10 again, I came inside get order. Again, order ID is 1 to 3. That is what I am carrying. That is great. Now I know that once this guy returns something, it will come inside the order, and taking the order, I have to call the next method. So I'll put another debug point also over here so that it lands over here. I'll continue with this. Order ID is 1 to 3. I'll do Fn F10. Again Fn F10. Then what did it return? Let's see what is the order. Wow, I am seeing this order is promise and is pending. Okay, fine. So let's go. Let's move ahead. Let's go Fn F10. It went inside the get tracking info. Order is again a promise. What I was expecting over here is this order will give me the actual order information, but it is still a promise. It is not a result promise. Why exactly it is happening? The crux of the story over here is get order is an asynchronous function, is an async function. What an async function returns? An async function returns a promise. If you are returning a promise by yourself, great. If you return a value, it will wrap it inside a promise and finally it will return. We have learned that from the async await session. Now, as get order return a promise, you have to use the await keyword while calling the function to resolve that promise. Here we have missed that await keyword. But in the subsequent one, get tracking info, we have used the await keyword. That means we want to resolve the promise. So that's the reason for get tracking info. If I progress further, I will see that is going inside the promise. Okay, now it is going inside the promise. I see it is going inside the promise. But what it is giving, as this order itself is not a resolve promise, it is giving me that order.id is not present, so there is no order ID, and it is rejecting this promise. So if I now come out, I'll get this error. One thing to remember over here, the get order promise, it would have got resolved at a later point in time. If I had continued to put this debug point, running this debug point, I would have hit this resolve reject later point in time. But even in that case, at this particular line where we are trying to fetch the data of the resolve promise from get order, we won't get that particular information because we have not used await. That's why it will always return a promise, not the resolved value from the promise, even when the promise got resolved or even when the promise got rejected. So neither we get a resolved value nor we get a rejected value if we don't use the await keyword in front of it. I hope this is very crystal clear, like why we are doing it along with debugging. So now if I go back to VS Code once more, and a small change that if I do over here is adding this await keyword, everything will work, right? So let's see that. Yeah, tracking order is 1 to 3. Current location is warehouse. Estimated delivery is 2 days. That's what we wanted, right? We're getting everything great. Now, if I debug this problem once more in front of you, like what happens? Track order 1 to 3. Great. So let's move on. Fn F10 inside track order. Now order ID is 1 to 3. I'm going to get inside get order. Fn F10. I'm inside get order with order ID 1 to 3. All right, very good. So I'll come out of this. That's great because asynchronous call after once again, then only this will get resolved. So Fn F10 see is get resolved after once again. So I have this order ID 1 to 3. Now it resolved with this particular information. Okay. Now if I see this order, instead of the promise, are you seeing I'm getting the resolved value? The ID is 1 to 3. It is a book and it is under processing. Now this order, from this order is now 1 to 3 book processing. From here, I'll check whether the order.id present or not. Yes, it will present, and that's the reason it will go and resolve this with the details of what is the order ID, what is the location, and is ETA, and then it will be back and print this information. You understood the cycle, right? So never ever miss await, and if you miss await, it always return the promise, not the resolved or rejected value. I hope it was useful to you. Hey guys, so we have debugged 5 problems, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have just spent some time on the 5 problems. These problems are quite simple problems. In real life, there could be a combination of all these 5. There could be a combination of 3 among them or more than that. So that is why please do the assignments and the tasks that I have given you. I have given you 4 problems to solve. Please do them in the similar manner so that you can debug them using your VS Code or your Chrome debugger. Do step by step, try to find out what is the problem, fix it, and again run it and see why it is now running correctly. That's the way that you learn. Again, if you are looking for solving this kind of problem, more in-depth problem with me, let me know if you're interested. I'm going to bring something after 40 days of JavaScript to do this with you, to continue this with you. Till then, stay well. Don't forget to subscribe to tapaScript. Looking forward to your motivation and my subscribers. You guys are awesome. You are fantastic. Keep supporting tapaScript. Keep learning. Before I end, just let me tell you, we have now completed the module number 5. It's done. Now we are heading over to our last module of 40 days of JavaScript. That is module number 6. Excited? Let's do it.